Live from Studio A in PressCorps World Headquarters, this is Zero Dark PressCorps. It's a live, community-based call-in show, fielding your thoughts on and tales from the Foxhole War. So join the Discord right now through the link below, sign in through the call queue text channel, and hop in the voice lounge for a chance to share your story. Tonight's developer guest, lead developer, Mark Foot. And now, your host, 13-time winner of the Geoffrey Jennings Award for Excellence in Journalism, Geoffrey Jennings.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps. Just as the man said, here we are in the closing days, or at least we think maybe the Colonials will have a resurgence, but the closing days of War 62, 60-second conflict, and we are here with Mark Foot. Mark Foot, how has the 60-second war been? Okay, hold on. It's a bit. So you say it's a bit longer than you thought it would be. This is me working on OBS, because of course nothing ever works. As you can tell. How about speak now? Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, there you go. Perfect.
Great.
So then, yeah, you said it was going longer than you thought it would be.
Yeah, we always try our best to not interfere with the schedule of wars. It's been a while since we kind of had to wind down a war on our own. It does happen, but we try not to do that. But unfortunately, because we try not to do that, we almost have to work on the schedule of players. So we might predict that a war is going to end sooner, and it doesn't. So we thought that the Dead Harvest war would start this week, but it's going to be starting next week now, because it's the end of the week now, and the war isn't over yet. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely one of the challenges of working on a game where players decide, for the most part, when a war is going to end.
Right, and you know the funny thing is, the PressCorps Rocket Watch has been at imminent for the past, I think, almost 3 days now. I did not expect no one to fire a rocket for this long.
Yeah, same with us. I mean, we brought the rockets back in for one of the reasons was that we thought that it would be we speculated, because again, we don't have real full control over these things, but we speculated that would bring an end to this war sooner. But it's interesting. No one, I believe there was an attempt, at least one, if not more, at one point, but no one has fired them yet.
Successfully fired them. Yeah, there have been attempts. We covered the first one that a couple of wardens managed to get all the way down south to the Swan in Great March, but that will have more than a couple wardens. But still, yeah, I think we're going to see them this is a prediction, but I think we're going to see them at the last second and probably in huge clusters. So that'll be interesting. It'll be like a real missile exchange.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
All right, well, let's get into my question. Just one question, but I think it's a big one that's been on a lot of people's minds as we go into asymmetry here. Just a full disclosure, I do share these questions with the developers beforehand. That way we can get the clearest answer. They have time to think about it and they're not ambushed. Because there's going to be a lot of ambushing, naturally, in a call-in show for the rest of the show. So regardless, what can you say of the disconnect between player agency and how the community wants to conduct their war, and the devs' decision to seemingly force playstyles in the asymmetry of the factions? In other words, the potential culture developed naturally by the players being usurped by the culture that comes from being handed a specific set of tools, like a forced culture there. Has there been any thought of reworking the new vehicle system to be more modular and less narrow or niche to give the players back some of that agency?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think we've had similar discussions about this before. I think on other parts of the game, like the towns, as an example, right? It's like, why in a game where one of the goals is to make it as player driven as possible, why are the towns themselves not built by the players, right? How it's kind of like, how far can you go? And I think that for us, the goal of making it player driven and having lots of player agency is not so much of a goal in itself. Like it's not like that's the driving reason for this game to like exist, but the actual driving reason for why we want to make this game is we want it to feel as real as possible, like as much as possible that the players are feeling like in a real war. And to be specific, we try to arrive at that goal by allowing players to drive as many parts of the war as possible. So like all the weapons are made by the players. All
Right. But then, wouldn't the asymmetry potentially cutting you off? Wouldn't the asymmetry take that away? Because instead of someone wanting to go, hey, I would like a glass cannon in the form of an anti-tank gun on a half track. That'd be really cool. But I can't do that because I'm a colonial. Instead, I'm stuck with mortars. So I'm kind of forced down that route because my faction just is that way.
Yeah, I think it does. I think if you look at it from the standpoint of purely player agency and player choice, you're absolutely right. It does take away a little bit of that, but it does it in the same way that we take away the ability for players to choose where their where their logi towns are, or like why is there even a town pre-built in the first place, right? We kind of have chosen our point in that spectrum of like full sandbox player like agency on one end, and on the far other end, everything's fixed. We sort of pick the point of like, we give you the canvas, right? And the canvas includes this world, this town, these factions, this lore, and then within that framework, that's how you like operate. But it's definitely a spectrum, and there's definitely pros and cons as you move along that spectrum. So certainly some of it is lost there, but I think the part that is gained is that you also feel it also feels more like this could have been a real thing. This could have been like an alternate history, which I think is a big driving goal of ours from the beginning. Is we've always said when we made the lore, we don't make it like a fiction. Like we want it to feel like someone could have taught this lore in a history class, right? At like a history like lecture at a college. That's
Sure.
how we approach it.
Oh, for sure. And they'd probably put on Potatoes documentary. They put that on in the class. Lower the lights.
Yeah.
Let's watch this documentary. But I don't know. I feel like I'm feeling a disconnect here between what you're trying to reason it with, and what we're actually seeing as a result. Because again, this might have been my fault and a lot of people's individual thoughts in like just projecting what they wanted to see versus what you guys were actually trying to tell us was going to happen. But remember, there was a lot of talk about more of a modular system where it's like, okay, so let's say you have a base light tank frame, and then from there you can choose to put on that frame anti-tank gun, mortar, something, tankette, maybe a machine gun, something like that. Again, I don't think you guys ever really confirmed that, but do you see a potential more flexibility there in how people can choose their own thing? You can still, and that's still allowing people to have the freedom to choose what weapons they want, what direction they want to fight the war in, and at the same time, even to what you were saying, you still have that history. That's still something that a country along the line at war would choose to do, like how the Germans in World War II said, "Hey, you know what? Let's just make everything big. Let's just do quality over quantity, and let's just really well trained units." And then along the line, that's what they chose. Maybe the Wardens in Foxhole in War 63, maybe they can have that choice for themselves, and that maybe even gives it more history. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're getting at is a fully modular system where you can like take almost these like Lego pieces and try to
easier said than done. Technically, I understand, but
for sure. But let's just put that aside for 1 second, right? Like, I think what you're saying is that kind of system, and I do think we have thought about doing a fully flexible system like that previously. I think where the current trajectory is to try to get at some of that is not necessarily a Lego system. Like, you've seen a lot of games out there that do have like a Lego system, and they end up feeling a lot more like a Minecraft type of maybe to resolve the technical side, it ends up being more of like a Minecraft type of system.
Sure.
Type of feeling. But I think to try to get at some of that, I think what we can try to do is over time try to fill in enough gaps, because right now the tech tree of both sides is actually, I think that's one of the things that we're struggling with right now, is that there's just not enough stuff. Like, it's
to justify the kind of narrowness of it.
Yeah, like, one of the goals was supposed. So I think to your point, and I think to be fair to your point, I could understand where things may have been like seen that that's what we would have gotten. And right now what we have right now maybe not like match some of that flexibility, but I think what we ultimately wanted was this feeling like you are able to make these choices, and perhaps there's like so much there that it certainly feels like, okay, in this war, like they chose to go after this, right? Like one faction chose to go after this instead of that. But where we're at right now is because the tech trees are not filled enough, it does feel a little bit more like at certain points, okay, you just have to get this vehicle because it's the best one, right? Like this faction knows that X vehicle or Y vehicle is the one to get, and there isn't really much of a choice, and you don't really feel as much like, okay, we ended up like picking this over that, right? So
right. And yeah. I think sorry, well, just I think we want to cap it too because we want to get to the calls, but I do think it's a deeper topic because it kind of gets to something even more core than that, the core of the issue, which is like how what happens in the game amongst thousands of players in a massive sandbox over hundreds and hundreds of hours, stuff that you and I will never fully comprehend just by the absolute enormity of it. But all of that far outpacing anything Matt could ever write in the lore, anything you guys could ever design in the tech tree, anything I could ever write in my stupid lore. And so it's, when this is the now infamous Max comment, but when he said how Colonials have an open top vehicles because they don't care as much about their lives as opposed to the Wardens, and that was meme to hell, and whatever, it was funny. And I know he wasn't really harping too much on it, but I think that does cut into it because because then he tried to say like, oh, that's just the lore, but that's kind of a disconnect between the what happens in the lore, kind of like on the other side, south of the Great March, and then the moment you go into the Great March, into the actual game space, things are a little different. So I'm not saying that's something that can be easily rectified, because again, it's just such an enormous thing. How the hell do you account for all these cultures and relationships, and how do you put that into your development? Goodness, I don't know. I'm just trying to point out that maybe, and for a lot of people, I think a lot of people are trying to funnel this that argument into mine, but just trying to make sense of it, because maybe they're not getting exactly what they want, and that's the price of freedom, right? You give them a little bit, they want all of it.
Well, I mean, to your point, like, I think I actually like this question as a general question in making these kinds of like games, right? It's like how,
right.
Like, it's almost like beyond like Foxhole, right? If we were to sit down like right now and say, hey, let's make another game that is like Foxhole, and our goal is very similar goals, how far do you take that aspect? Is it better to go much further in terms of that type of like agency, but then you start having these other like trade-offs in there, right? And I think it's a very valid question to ask, if I have to be honest. And I think it's one of those things where like thinking about making these types of games and like future games. It's definitely the kind of thing where you end up where the conversation, where these discussions become a lot more like philosophical again, and
Right.
we get back into that world. And then usually what ends up happening is you go in a circle, you come back, okay, well now we got to get out of the philosophical world, and we got to sit down and actually make something, right? So it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and again, that's just the power of the sandbox, power of the internet, and the power of everyone online doing something that's quite frankly never been done like this before. So we take the hits as we come across them. So anyway, in any case, that was my one big question. Usually I have a few more, but that was my big philosophical one that I wanted to get to. It's been biting at me. So, and quite a few other people. So let's get to our callers. Our first caller here today, first one who got into the call queue, is Lafarfide 3981. Welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps.
What?
Hi, welcome back.
Already?
Yes, you're on the air. Did you have a question?
Yes, I have multiple actually. Let me just mute the stream because I didn't expect it to be that quick.
Okay.
So I have multiple questions.
Sure.
For Markfoot, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but why can't the Harvester destroy bunkers?
Why can't you say Harvester?
Yes.
Destroy a bunker?
Yeah.
Right. I guess you're saying in the context of you've taken over an area and you want to clean it up, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to clean up the enemy bunkers. Yeah, I don't have a new answer. It's just something that we probably just haven't gotten to.
Okay.
Should it?
Can I need it?
Real quick, Mark, do you think the Harvester should be able to deconstruct bunkers?
I think that we'd have to look at all the corner cases, so I don't want to just say within a couple of moments. So what we'd want to do is, like, if you've already taken over like a whole area, right? And the Harvester, part of the reason is to clean up these areas, then I would say yes. But I want to say that with the asterisk of I haven't thought of all the corner cases that ways that it could go bad, right?
My gut reaction, to just play devil's advocate, my gut reaction is, well, it's kind of like an extended mechanic where in order to slow down the advance of the side that just captured the area, they need to take the time to spend a lot of ordnance to blow up all these bunkers that were constructed by their opponents, and then they can move on. So it's kind of a way to slow them down indirectly. I don't know. That's just what I thought off the top of my head.
I mean, it's a matter to me, since I often do like frontline cleaning, I guess. It's more of a, like, it's either a case of if I had a Harvester to do it, I'd do it, and it would take me some time, to harvest defenses, and it takes some fuel. For the bunker, it's just a matter of getting a crate of satchel down to the front and be done with it.
Sure. But then, all that takes a time to actually build and transport, and the slots it takes for someone to carry that stuff over.
Yeah, but it's almost equivalent to bringing a Harvester from a back line, fueling it, and then grinding all the defenses. The defenses take, like, it's at least 30 seconds for each defenses to be harvested by a Harvester, depending on what it is.
You would be hoping that the Harvester would be able to do it faster than any other method, right?
No, I just have the Harvester to do it as another tool besides satchels.
Okay. Yeah, that's a thought. Again, it's also tricky because, well, I mean, if it's not going to be faster, then I guess that's my point is moot. I was just going to bring up that it's always easier to destroy something than to build something, particularly with bunkers where it's how many days does it take to set that stuff? So I mean, it wouldn't make a difference. So yeah, forget it.
But as a follow-up to this, the mechanic of the Harvester, the front of it, it's kind of a tumbler excavator.
Right.
It's what it looks like. It's not the intended purpose of it within the game. So would it be realistic to have, in the other hand, the Harvester being used to effectively dig trench faster with a late tech technology, kind of like with the CV construction?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would actually be a good excuse to to have a new vehicle in the game.
I mean, yes, we could have an excavator, but at the end of the day, you can either make a new vehicle out of it, or on the coding side, you can save time and just use that, or even use the this construction vehicle, which basically the boom of an excavator, just have a jackhammer at the end of it instead of a I don't know the word in English for the thing that grabs the dirt and take it out.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So I think excavator, crane, or shovel, right? Is that what you're talking? Or the handheld one?
Yeah.
Yeah, shovel.
Yeah.
Or spade. But actually, no. That I was trying to think about it. A lot of people think this is like one of those misconceptions, like the rocket is a nuke, but it's actually not. That's just what the community thinks it is. People think that the harvester can destroy mines, as if
it can. It can.
I'm sorry, can it?
Yes, it can.
Oh,
I've used
okay.
the harvester.
I thought someone tried that and they blew up and it failed.
No. The harvester is quite tanky on a front line. So if there's no immediate armor on that front line, you can effectively use the harvester as a minesweeper.
Oh, okay. Can we confirm that, Mark?
Yeah, you can use that.
Yeah, the last I checked, you could do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
what the hell happened with that one guy? He just blew up. Okay.
I don't know, maybe like...
I think he just got unlucky. It might have been a bug.
You know, RPG, or sometimes there's a new bug lately where you cannot see the projectile coming to you, where you die and you just blew up
possibly.
out of the blue.
Possibly, yeah.
So maybe it was just something like that or whatever.
Okay, confirmed. Harvesters can be used as a minesweeper, just like the Sherman attachment in World War II. That's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe it actually is handled as like a specific case, and it's not just by virtue of the sandbox, unfortunately.
Okay. There's that, and then also it can still deconstruct like foxholes, right?
Yeah, foxholes. It can construct foxholes, wall. It's actually super useful to take care of gates during a push or concrete walls. This is very useful to take care of that. I use it as a combat engineering vehicle because we don't have a combat engineering vehicle in Foxhole. Which would be great because a combat engineering vehicle is used to do all sorts of things. You could use it as an armored recovery vehicle. Could use it as a thing. That'd be a nice vehicle to have. But yeah, I use the harvester often on front lines. People give me weird looks. Why the fuck do you have an harvester on the front line? It's just you see, like, as soon as I start to do something, you see people with like, oh wait, you can do that? Wait, for real? Like, yes, you can.
All right, well, LaFarfade, thank you so much. I guess the answer is wait and see, maybe?
Yeah, the answer is the same as last time, wait and see. As a second question, though, more
yeah, we'll close with this one.
Okay, you're going to close with this one, that's fine. What is, like, for vehicles that are utility vehicles, not combat vehicles, do you guys have something planned? Like, to me, it's an utility vehicle because it's a transport vehicle. But on sea, you have the freighter, which is enabling you to move a large cargo, a large sum of cargo, to another coastal city. But I feel like it's lacking, and I'm not talking about train because I don't really like the idea of trains. Because at the end of the day, it's just going to be another same thing. The train's going to go to another station. And doesn't really solve the problem, but it's a way to have something to transport large sums of cargoes and multiple containers over land, kind of like the freighter does on the sea, but on land.
So you're asking if there's going to be an equivalent of a freighter, but in some sort of a truck form.
I'm asking, this is part of it, but also we're going to see more utility vehicles in general. Vehicles are not tailored to combat, but very just utility vehicles.
Yeah, so I think we will see more utility vehicles, so that's a fairly confident yes on that one. In terms of something like a freighter, the freighter is specifically allowed to carry a lot because it incurs the trade-off of having to be on water, and you have to use a seaport, and there's all these extra requirements. So we probably won't see something like that level of that on land, but there's definitely more utility or non-combat vehicles, more logi vehicles that.
Or perhaps a buff to current vehicles. So like, you guys nerfed the flatbed, as we cannot use it to run over tier 2 trenches anymore, which is something I was doing quite often. But like, there's other vehicles like for example, a CV would fit, like the game asset when you look at it would fit on the bed of a flatbed, but it's not something that's possible. Are you guys looking into being able to do this at some point?
The question is there anything like the ability to put something that's even bigger than a shipping container on a flatbed?
No, it's like, because if you take a region, let's say you have to take, I don't know, you have to bring a CV all the way from a town in a region across the border of another region to build a fob or to rebuild a relic or a town or something. Would it be possible to have the CV be able to be transported by a flatbed and driven there and be unloaded by a crane?
CV specifically is a tough one because the CV is designed for a very unique role of ensuring that your supply line is very secure, and being able to put that on the flatbed truck would be tough because it might go against some of the goals that it's fulfilling. So probably not something like that.
What do you mean it goes against the essence of what its purpose is?
Well, because the CV, so ensuring I have the correct question, you're asking why can't you put a CV on a flatbed truck, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because a CV's speed is tuned. It's slower than a flatbed truck, right? So it's tuned specifically such that you would have to have a more secure line because it doesn't go as fast. It's a lot more like vulnerable than something like a flatbed truck. And this goes back a long time. Like there's, maybe some of that should be like reviewed at some point, but the 3-4 year kind of rewind back in time, there was a time when you can build bases with your hammers, right? And that exposed a whole lot of cheap tactics, kind of like quote unquote, and you didn't really have to secure a line. So that was always its purpose. That's still its purpose. There might be a question of whether or not that should be reviewed, but that's the current reasoning behind it. Okay.
So the speed of the CV is a balance thing more than anything. This is what I get from you, right?
Yeah, its level of like vulnerability, I would say, and then speed is a part of making it vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You opened just an whole can of worms. I know you're gonna have a little question about the silver hands.
I think we'll have to get that with another person. But Lafarfade, always make sure to, if you had any of these ideas, make sure to write them down and feel free to submit them to the subreddit. You'll get downvoted to hell like everything else does, but at least it'll be there and the devs will most likely see it according to what they say. So it's good to get it out.
It's better to get downvoted to hell for an idea than just being called Warden bias, Warden bias, Warden bias.
Yeah, you just ignore them.
Yeah.
You ignore the usual trolls.
Thank you for having me. I'm off to watching the presidential debate tonight, so
have a good one.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
All right, coming up next here at Zero Dark PressCorps, taking your calls live on the air through the Discord link below, we have Stranger Days. Stranger Days, welcome back.
Hello, yes, it's good to be back. Last week we ended off with me wanting to discuss how I think the Colonials should be using their vehicles. I know it's presumptuous of a Warden to be saying that, but I really don't get why y'all keep, or not y'all as in you, but y'all as in Colonials keep teching the 68 over the LMG bike, and why they refuse to tech the tankette. Like, if the Wardens had the tankette, the Colonials would be screaming for it to be nerfed right now, because we would just keep shoving people into it whenever the fucking thing, whenever the crew for it took damage. Like, Like, really, it's a beautiful vehicle. It's got the health of a light tank, even if it doesn't have tank armor, but it does still deflect AT rounds. It still does deflect sticky grenades, it still deflects AT rifles, it still deflects 68mm shells used by the 68 gun. But it does all of that at, like, day 3 of the war. At day 3 of the war, you have a vehicle with the health of a light tank and the best version of the HMG in the game. It has more accuracy, it fires faster, and it also loses accuracy more slowly. It doesn't have as much recoil, essentially. This vehicle is insane, and yet every war I see the Colonials pick something else. Last war actually did make sense, though, because they had a mortar available as opposed to their their tankette, and I can't see anyone not picking a mortar that early in the war. Another thing that I don't get is why Colonials think the LMG bike is bad. Like, they've teched it every war as their second iteration tech, generally speaking, except for this war. This war they actually picked the armored car, which I think is the right choice, in all honesty. Armored car is an amazing choice to vet. But the LMG bike is the second best partisan vehicle in the game, and it's available so very early.
How good is the off-road?
What?
How good is its off-road capabilities?
It is not as good as the Jeep, but it is still a motorcycle. Motorcycles are able to do relatively good off-road, especially when you're boosting, and you have to think to yourself, this is a bonus, actually, because you're using fuel, you're in the back lines, you're partisaning, you're killing fuel trucks at mines, you're killing people who are in their own trucks. You take their fuel from their vehicle, you just wrench it open, you swap the fuel out to petrol, so then in addition to a vehicle now being disabled in the middle of the road, it also has no fuel, so anybody wanting to move it out of the way has to destroy it. On top of that, you then kill enemy fuel trucks, you take their fuel from the mines, now they have to replace the fuel trucks at the mines. It's amazing, and the best part of all, it costs B-mats. It doesn't cost R-mats. It doesn't bankrupt your late-game economy. It doesn't do anything poor to your faction as a whole. It is literally the second best partisan vehicle in the game. The first best, of course, being the LMG Jeep, because let's face it, it's a Mongolian horse archer of the modern age. I do think that Colonials on Tech 1, it doesn't necessarily matter too much what they choose. I think the FMG is probably the better choice of the two. Even if the FMG is weak in the late game, who cares about the late game? That's like 5 to 7 days away. It is about what the FMG does now, and what it does now is it kills buildings, it kills players, and it kills any vehicle in that area, except for the tankette. Going back to the 68, though, I think the Colonials have been very wrong to choose the 68 literally every war thus far, because what are they killing with it? Like really, what are they killing with it? What are they killing with it that they couldn't already kill with another vehicle? If they want to kill our armored cars, they have their own armored car, or they have the LMG bike, which they could just rush down an armored car with LMG bikes. I would actually pay money to see that. That sounds absolutely hilarious. Like 5 LMGs just chasing after an armored car.
I think part of the problem is that none of this is explained in the game itself. So imagine you're a new player, you're being overwhelmed with all these things. I bet you a lot of people didn't know that armor bounced things, or that there's even an armor system, or that harvesters can destroy mines, right? People, so a lot of it's just kind of hard to get to know. And is the wiki updated with all of this stuff?
I never use the wiki for anything. Oh, hey, I see Foxy's talking shit about me in the Twitch chat. Hi, Foxy, how are you doing? But
it is kind of unfair that I don't have a Colonial here, being able to refute you. I don't use these vehicles personally. I don't really play partisan. I'm more the target of a partisan.
Amount of them. Both I've fought them. I have worked. I've worked very hard to take Colonial vehicles because early war they are insane. Our vehicles do not match up in any way at all. Like, even if you want to say that, oh, well, Wardens have APC. Yeah, but our APC gets killed by 4 guys with SMGs now. Like, We don't have the tools to combat Colonials directly if they choose their offensive vehicles, if they choose to be aggressive with their vehicles. But thus far, I've seen the Colonials primarily tech counter options that are over counters. In the case of the 68 millimeter mostly just kills armored cars, and I mean, really, you already have LMGs and HMGs on your vehicles. Why are you worried about armored cars? That's all the Wardens have for the next 3 tech levels or so.
Mm-hmm.
You go down to tech level, and what do the Colonials have? They generally have either their Doru, or they have, in this case, the ATAC, and I also think that the ATAC, while it is an amazing vehicle, once again, is the wrong choice, because what is it countering? It's countering vehicles that are already killed by HMGs. HMGs already counter things across the board, and they're more useful in general purpose. I do think that the ATAC is amazing, and I think that it would be an amazing choice for the Colonials to vet, because it would become faster, and armored cars, when they get vetted, they get roughly the same health and armor as actually a light tank. So imagine a light tank that's faster off-road, that also has an AT gun on it, or an AT rifle, and can just doink at the sides of vehicles and absolutely destroy the armor. The issue is also that Warden late-game vehicles are all about the armor that they have. Wardens, their main thing is that we have slow vehicles that are heavily armored. Usually we're more expensive. I suppose a few people could say that this is a direct upgrade, but we also spend the majority of the game having, as I said before, inferior vehicles. Further on down the list, we see that Wardens and Colonials sort of catch up in terms of vehicles. I don't really think that the Colonials in the 4th and 3rd areas of the tech tree have better vehicles. But then, all the way at the end, Wardens have all of their value, all of their tech value, all of the good parts of their vehicles shoved into tanks.
Let's actually extrapolate that and put it into something for Mark here. Mark, do you think that now that you have everything on the table and that everything's been played out for a few wars, all the vehicles are out on the table and they're played out for a few wars, do you think things are lopsided in terms of the focus of the Colonial vehicles and the focus of the Warden vehicles, or so early game, late game, and it feels kind of weird? What are your thoughts and assessment on that balance right now?
Yeah, I think that I think there are issues. There's a common sentiment that the Colonials are more early game heavy and the Wardens are more late game heavy. I do think there is some truth to that, and it is something we're taking a look at. Even if you just were to look at the trees on their own, without kind of removing the million factors that are that could be impacting how well one can say they are balanced, you can even just kind of see that there's more choices in the early game on the Colonial side. I think there's also another thing that I've heard over the last while is that there is a gap in terms of the accessibility of vehicles. Some people citing that perhaps certain Warden vehicles are easier to use, less skill is required. And this isn't me saying it. I'm just kind of spitting back out what
Colonials saying that.
What I've been hearing. Whereas the Colonials are saying that generally they require more effort, more coordination, right? So and to be fair, I do think there is some truth to that as well.
All right.
I mean,
well,
why don't you give Wardens the Colonial tech tree for a war and the Colonials the Warden tech tree and see how well they use our stuff? I would absolutely love to dumpster Colonial towns early war in a tankette.
I just don't know, because all the vehicles I come across are usually abandoned and on fire, or something that I have to salvage, as opposed to something that I can actually make and concertedly use without being in a group. Yeah, Stranger Days. Thank you so much for giving us a lecture here. Appreciate the kind of the backseat guidance on all these vehicles.
Well, I mean, it's just I've just seen them do awfully for what is it, 5 wars in a row now, and I don't want the Warden vehicles to be nerfed because that means that we spend early game eating dick and late game eating dick, and I don't want to just be a sandbag for 2 weeks. I don't want my faction to literally just be the AI that the heroes of the campaign have to beat into.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you stopping by.
One time.
I'm going. All right. Coming up next, Rhodes Go Ever On. Welcome back, Rhodes. How are you?
Hi, I am doing well. How about the two of you?
Doing good.
Good.
Nice. Oh, let me turn up Mark because I could barely hear you. Okay, so I have one question with maybe a follow-up for Mark, and then one question for you, Geoffrey Jennings. Actually was meant to ask this last week, but we'll get around to this week. Starting off with Mark Foot. Sometime about last week, Max made a comment on the FOD, and part of the comment reads like this. A lot of people that are listening are probably very familiar with this. It reads, "Silverhands aside, another thing that we agree with is that the damage of tanks seems to outstrip their armor. Tank battles are ending way, way too quickly. Part of that could be due to AT damage in and of itself. Perhaps this kind of damage is detracting from enjoyable tank battles rather than adding to them." Unquote.
They're valuable, but almost so fragile in the grand scheme of things that it doesn't become fun anymore.
And fun is, I feel like some people do find it fun because they like, being able to run up with, I don't know, an FA or something like that and be able to delete vehicles off the field, and that for them is fun. But I think what Max was trying to get to was, like the key there was that the tank battles are ending far too quickly for enjoyable vehicle combat. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, Mark Foot. Putting Silverhands and the more specific things aside, I don't want to talk about that specifically. I want to talk about kind of the design philosophy, if you will, going forward, especially looking at 1.0. What is the overall vision for vehicle combat aside from just slower or more enjoyable? Can we get an expansion on that, please?
Yeah, so I won't go over. So I agree with the statement that Max made that you mentioned. It's something that we have been talking about a lot lately. I think the other big thing that we would like to explore is more interesting vehicle combat in the sense of trying to break up the meta of what you see. So let me be specific. So especially with things like tanks, but we certainly see this with like half tracks as well, is players really being really afraid to lose their vehicles, and a lot of the combat boils down to just staying just outside of range at the front, trying to peek forward, taking your shot, and then like backing away to repair your vehicle when it's hit. And I think this is just a very natural way to play. Like, you don't want to lose your vehicle, right? And because you can repair it, why not bring it back, right? But I think what we would like to do is try to introduce things into the game to allow players to try different approaches other than that. Like, maybe right now it's almost, for at least a lot of players, they feel like it's a disadvantage to go ahead and commit your tank into combat, right? Whether or not it's advantageous or not is the story. That's just how we see a lot of players feel. What we want to do is maybe introduce something where the feeling is more the opposite. Like, maybe you do want to commit your vehicle because that is the optimal way, right? Maybe the fear of losing your vehicle shouldn't be so high in certain cases. I think that's something that we want to push into, because when you do see a tank combat happen where it's definitely more rare. Most of the time you do see this, everyone's scared, just kind of like peeking out and shooting. But when you see combat happening more in like an open field, it's really cool to me, right? And I've been in some of those before, and they are rare, but they are really exciting, and you see a lot of the mechanics finally working the way that they should. But adding on to what Max was saying, even when that does happen, it tends to be a bit like over too fast. So I think like getting at more of interesting combat outside of just being scared to lose your vehicle at the front, and then making those interesting scenarios last a bit longer, I think is something that we would like to see.
Yeah, and I think to shed some light about the feeling that players are scared to lose their tanks, I don't think that's something unique to Foxhole. I think that's something that, at least I personally, somebody who, I guess my history with games is more on the RTS side than anything else.
Right.
I see a commonality there with lots of other RTS games like Age of Empires or StarCraft, where you want to be getting. I guess the best way I could describe it for like someone who's not in that would be free damage, which is damage that you can deal to an enemy without taking damage yourself. So if you can, as for example, a mortar half track, this is a very common thing, pre-align your azimuth and degrees and just move in, take a shot, and then move back. Just doing that constantly isn't necessarily being scared to lose it. It's just that's the best way to deal the free damage that you can without taking damage yourself. Now, with that said, I do agree that I think it's partially because once AP weaponry starts coming, or AP ammo starts coming out, a lot of people are scared to kind of die within 2 or 3 hits. Do you feel like just a simple buff to armor and health or a nerf to AP would fix that issue, or do you think it's something a little more nuanced?
I think it would certainly be a good start. Especially, I think one of the things we want to review was the vulnerability of like how much more vulnerable vehicles are at their flanks, which right now it is quite high. And I think the threshold at which they are disabled at, which I think you mentioned somewhere in there, yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I do think it would help. Fix is always a word that I stay away from because it's just attached to so much like fix. You fix the whole thing. There's no more work that needs to be done. But I think it's an improvement.
Yeah.
Kind of a periphery to that. I've actually been thinking about this for a while now, since the last Zero Dark, where we were talking about there's a lot of talk about artillery and fire support, and particularly field artillery. Haha, joke, APFA. But actually, being on the receiving end of that really sucks. It's not fun, and it happens so fast. And I think you, Mark, or maybe KFC or someone might have confirmed it, but. Yeah, no, actually, I think it was Max who was saying that. Yeah, the fact that artillery is used as a sniper is really annoying. Has there? So then, kind of in conjunction with Rhodes' question, are we going to see more of inaccurate field fire support weaponry? Like, I don't know, mortars. Maybe they get the least of it, but maybe with field artillery, they're pretty. They can get like a cone of fire, like the howitzer can.
Yeah, I think that is exactly the direction we want to go in the future.
Yeah.
With we do want to expand on the artillery game, and I think that's the way that we're going to be pushing more in the future.
Just so fast. Not even with AP shells, it's just so fast, and it's literally has 150 meters of range. So and yeah, it does take work, a lot of work to get it going, but far faster than usually a tank can recognize it and move and maneuver. So it's ugly. So yeah, Rose, did you have anything else for us here?
I was gonna say that's a good cap for that topic. I want to shine the spotlight on you now, Mr. Jennings.
Oh, okay.
So, a lot of people are coming in and asking Markfoot a lot of questions, or KFC a lot of questions and stuff. But I want to ask you. Their questions are pitched to what's the future of Foxhole. I'm curious what the future of PressCorps might be. Do you have any ideas for the growth of PressCorps and how can the community help in growing and expanding what's happening here?
For the record, full disclosure, Rhodes is part of the press corps, and no, I did not ask him to ask me that today. This was not a setup.
Entirely me catching you off guard.
Yeah, but the truth is, the press corps, development of the press corps is completely contingent on my personal development, no matter how much I try to kind of spread the power around, try to spread the responsibilities around, and make it a communal effort amongst the corps. It really just comes back to me. That's just the reality of it. Not that I take any particular pleasure in that, but just being able to run the stream from my studio. We did talk about maybe buying a computer, a separate computer that we can set up at someone's house, and then we can. I think I talked about this before, but we can do like remote desktop, and that computer is literally just for streaming. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I got some income. I made some savings. I can do $750, and then going back to my personal development, finances are a thing. And oh no, I cannot do that. So it's tricky because I've cornered myself into this niche, this aesthetic, this shtick of being a newsman with integrity and trying to nail that era of reporting, of good journalism, good war reporting. The problem is that takes time, right? So that takes a lot of time. Like, for instance, you and me, we've been watching the development of these rockets. We've got a hair trigger on like messaging, but hey, sirens are in Fairmore. Oh, sirens are in we heard sirens in John Vale. Oh, we got reports of people in the Swan. We're just on standby to raise the level, and it's like, well, yeah, no, it's nothing here. So it's just a lot of work, and that's just a microcosm of the development of the press corps. Well, in terms of all the things I want to do, all the cool things I would really like to do, it's hard because I have a 40-hour job. I have people who depend on me. I have a mortgage to pay, which is really weird as a young person. That's not the norm at all. But I do have that.
That's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd say.
So yeah, that's just the reality of it. So if you notice, there's like long periods of time where there's nothing happening seemingly on the front end of the press corps, and that's just because, well, people are busy. Not just me, but a lot of the corps too. So they got school, they got work, and that's reflected on me too. So, and it pains me. It really does pain me whenever something really cool happens on the front line. A big operations happen, and I'm not there to cover it, and and we can't be because we got to do stuff, and that's the heartache of an MMO that takes your life. Takes your life away.
And
so I hate
Foxhole
you, Mark.
Definitely does that.
But in terms of what you can do to help, and I'll carry on because I've talked too much now. But what the community can do to help is we have a submissions channel, a text channel, and just to share your story and to have people share their experiences would be really cool. And I've had a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I'm really glad you did that. You have this repository of places for people to share their story, because looking back on it, I have a hard time remembering what I do in Foxhole, but the place for people to share their story and for people to remember it and to do it in a cool way, in a nice aesthetic that we do is. So it's helpful. So stop by Press Corps World Headquarters. Stop by the Discords. Doesn't have to be an essay. Doesn't have to. We'll proofread it for you. English, we'll figure out your English for you. If it's not your first language, that's perfectly fine. But just to share something, and we'll turn it into content. That's how we run. We leech off of this community, but we also don't take money, so it's okay. So
we just report it. That's all.
Yeah. All right, hey Rhodes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great job, by the way, with the rocket, with the rocket watch.
Oh yeah, of course. Anyway, y'all have a good day.
Too. All right, coming up next, we got Disc. Welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Now, what'd you have for us here?
Well, it's a bit of a continuation of what I asked last time, honestly. It's about the infantry and how it all fits right now in Foxhole.
Last time you said it just didn't feel right, and you were kind of struggling on how to kind of articulate that, and I was kind of like inserting my own assessments on it. I don't know if that's how you really felt. So can you like articulate it a bit more this time?
Well, honestly, I wanted to just see Markfoot's just thoughts on this, because I saw KFC's thoughts, but I just saw his input on it, and I don't really know what Markfoot thinks about it. So if I could just first ask Mark, like, what do you think like infantry combat is about really in Foxhole? Like, is it one of the elements, or is it just like another part of the gameplay?
I actually feel like infantry combat should be the most prominent in the game. We've always said that in the big picture, Foxhole should be an infantry first game. So now that doesn't necessarily mean that like at different points in the project development, some other things don't kind of take the spotlight like away from it. Like right now, obviously, vehicles have a bit of that spotlight, but I think that infantry ultimately should be the most important thing. There's this intangible sense of every player is a soldier, and if it was just tanks everywhere all the time, then maybe it would take away from some of that. So I think what we want to do moving forward is to give some more power back to infantry in the coming in the not too distant future. So yeah, I definitely feel like infantry shouldn't be the sideshow; it should be like the main thing.
And but what I really am confused about is how it seems, at least to me, how the update seems to be like only affecting the vehicles, and how, like, let's say they're too prominent, then you guys have, like, just make the vehicles more expensive, like you did in last year with scarcity and all that. But I feel like you're just leaving infantry untouched, as if it's the default as it is, and I feel like it hasn't really had a large update or like anything really that changed the basic mechanics of it for a long time.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of the next, I think, big things on the plate. So there's not much disagreement there, unfortunately. It's something that we hope we'll see some movement on in the coming months. I think when we want to do it, we thought about changing a couple of things, but we didn't want it to just be like a drop in the bucket. We wanted to wait until there was a bit more of a comprehensive plan there before actioning it. So yeah, I just really am on the same page there.
And more of the specifics. So what is really the design goal? Because I can't really get a good idea of what the design goal for the weapons for the infantry really is. Right now, as it is, as I see it, is every weapon should have its own specific use. But the way that the tech system is implemented, it seems that we're supposed to choose what weapon we want. So we're supposed to be able to counterbalance which one we really want for which, uses. But are we ever going to get more weapons that have overlapping uses instead of just being individual weapons that just have completely different uses?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'd want to have similar. I think where we want to arrive at eventually is that if there are multiple choices, and perhaps if you've missed the choice at some point in the tech tree, there's another opportunity later on in the tree, and we want to have that kind of flexibility on the weapon side eventually. So I do think that if there's this sense of like infantry interest and content is really like we're kind of starved there. I think that's something that we really want to satisfy. And I think I do remember this question from 2 streams ago or something similar. I don't know if it was, but yeah, it's. Oh, was it last year? Okay, then I wasn't present for that. Maybe I'm imagining things. Yeah, it's like one of the big. This is a bit off topic, but I'm just gonna ramble about it because it's a bit of an excuse. But one of the challenges of making a tech tree or some sort of choice. Going actually back a little bit about the player agency thing that we were talking about at the beginning, is whenever you have a player agency, it's the thing you're always contending with is, well, once players use the agency and figure out what the best tool is in order to do something, they're just going to always go to that tool, right? So one of the challenges that we've had to face was, how do we provide choice without it just being, well, this is the best thing you can just always make, right? Like, always choose this one. Like, even in a fully modular system, let's say as an example, it's like, why wouldn't you just pick the tank with the best armor? We found out through several iterations, this is the best thing to make, right? So I think what we want to do with weapons in the future is to have this system where you're not really dealing with what's the best thing. It's more like, what is the best thing now, right? What is the thing that we need now compared to what the best thing the enemy has right now? And that might not always be the same best thing at that point in the war, in each and every war, right? And I think that's been one of the goals of this whole system. And like, we're only seeing half of it right now, but when we see the other half come later with the weapons, it will hopefully feel less of a void, where I can feel the void right now, as it sounds like. I think that's the feeling that you have too, is that there's this void on the infantry side.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I think, and I've also felt like the game, itself has had a difficult time with infantry for a long time. It has, it used to have really, really gimmicky mechanics and stuff. Now they became less gimmicky, but a little less diverse. I don't know how to explain it. It's just more like repetitive nonsense, I think, at this point. Yeah, basically, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I was more looking at like the the TF2 way of making it, where like every gun has its own specific use where you want to use it. It's yeah, that's more the way I like it, but I just don't see that really working.
I'm sorry, my mic was muted for everyone. Sorry, I'm back. Just saying, like, trying to make things actually carve out a genuine niche, as opposed to having things be just 2% difference and then everything just drowns out in a sea of guns that don't mean anything. Like TF2. Unlike TF2, where everything is good and like niched and peculiar. And yeah, there's bad weapons. There's stuff that's really unpopular, but at least it has a niche and it's specific.
Yeah, and yeah, I've also noticed that like this war, I've noticed that at Colonials they would not ever really unlock the H5, the light tank H5, because the Kreneska is superior. Even though we wouldn't unlock the Kreneska, and we knew that we were not going to unlock it this war, we would prefer taking the Ballista, even though we knew that, I think most of us knew we're not going to use it, because just the general thought that the H5 was inferior to the Kreneska, if I can explain that right. It feels like they just think that because it's inferior to another thing, that we should never unlock it, which I just don't understand.
There's also the perception too, right? Because it's a voting system, so voting kind of obfuscates everything. So if you have it locked behind that system, you may never actually see it for real. And because there's no way to test, in like say the lobby items or anything, or a different server or anything, and you don't really know how this feels. Which is cool that this thing is really precious and you don't get to spoil the surprise. But at the same time, it's like, well, how does it actually work? Right?
Yeah, like a lot of new players don't know what an armored car is, even though I would never like tech it, even because I really do not like those things, and I think most players wouldn't. But because the new players don't know what they are and what they do, they would try to like it. They would try it out.
So I guess one interesting question to pose there would be, let's say we had an opposite system where you could unlock anything, right? Like, let's say we had a very similar, like, just take the content that we have right now, but literally everything is possible. Anyone can just go in there as long as you're willing to grind out the resources, the iron. You'd be able to get anything you want. I guess what would you, like? Would you see that as a superior system? Would you, or do you think there would be some trade-offs there as well?
I honestly really like the idea of some people I've given that I just copy at this point. I like prototypes. I think they're a really cool addition. They make it feel like your tank or whatever you have is unique, and like you're the only one that has it. Like how caches used to work when those things were still around. Like you were the only person with a storm rifle at the start of the war. You felt unique. And I feel like the repair mechanic is still a bit not really good, because I think it only advantages people like the faction that has the mid regions, because you can't repair anywhere unless you're at a vehicle factory. So I think if that could be made better, if there was any way to repair it that didn't require a vehicle factory, that would really just make it easier to use like vehicles that you don't know how to use.
So you think that would, I guess, that would somehow solve the problems that you were posing earlier? Like I guess my question would be if it sounds like the issue that you were saying was that you're not able to unlock the thing that you want because everyone else thought that this thing was better, and as a result you'll never be able to try it. Is that?
Oh no. What I thought is that I don't really think that's the reason that we don't unlock it. I think that we don't unlock it because the faction, at least most of the people that control the tech, they just completely agree that they don't think the inferior tank is worth unlocking, even though we would need it, because it's inferior to another thing.
So then the mob mentality is trying to game it out ahead of time, or like based on just what they perceive, as opposed to actually being able to have it hands-on and being able to make the choice for themselves. Is that right?
No, I think it's just the general mentality that it's all or nothing. That because the H5 doesn't have its own like advantages compared to Kreneska, people just think that it's not even worth at all to even consider, because it's just not as good as the Kreneska. Even though we weren't going to unlock it, the Kreneska, you know what I mean? We weren't going to get the Kreneska, but we still didn't want the H5 because the Kreneska is better. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's pretty much how people think. I don't know if that clears up a bit.
Yeah, I think that you're saying that people view it as a definite upgrade.
The Kreneska, yeah, the light tank that can boost. They think it because it's an upgrade. I don't even understand the logic either. That's what I'm saying. That's just how, as I see it, how people see it, is because the light tank doesn't have its own, uses that the Kreneska doesn't have. They're just not even going to unlock it at all. They just don't think it's worth unlocking. Yeah.
No, I think if there is something there to discuss, it is that there are like downsides to all the vehicles versus I think unfortunately by default players feel that the variance compared to the quote unquote default version, that the default version is worse. And I think that we've done a poor job in surfacing some of that information out there, which I think is at least part of what you're trying to get at here.
Yeah, it's kind of it.
Is that you wouldn't even be able to know. And to be fair, there's other information in the game, like there's this whole like damage type system that is in the game that isn't surfaced, and I think that's another thing that we want to surface in the future, right? So that players will be able to understand certain mechanics a lot better, right? where right now they might not even know that like there's they just kind of know that AT ammo is better, right? But
Yeah.
not exactly. It's not quite made that clear. I don't like. There's pros and cons to getting to the point where everything is gotten down to a science, because again, going back to what I said earlier, it's tough when in a game like Foxhole, when we're trying to make things interesting every war, we're trying to make it feel like you're part of a real war. When things get too definite and known, it starts working against that, and that's when people start pulling out the card of, well, it's
So
video
then,
game.
so then,
But-
wouldn't the locking, just the fact that tech locks at all, things can get locked out? Doesn't that kind of make things more predictable, or sorry, yeah, more predictable, because then it kind of narrows down what you're able to actually do?
But I actually had an idea for this. It's more like people just want their own like tech. Like they just want always the same tech to be unlocked every war, right? They just want to find the optimal path. But
Well, they want to do what they want to do, right?
But yeah, but I think I know a lot of people would hate me if I even said this, but I think there should be at least some tiny bit of RNG in it, tiny bit, to at least force a little bit of diversity, so that it's not always the same thing. So let's say a certain level of tech every war could be randomized. That level would be a random tech that's unlocked. It doesn't matter which tech is put into which vehicle. When since the next update, the tech doesn't really matter because it's all accumulative. Once the next level is reached, it's going to take a random vehicle. You know what I mean?
It's funny because like, I'm zooming out and I'm just thinking like, why is this like this anyway? Right? Why does an army and a country that goes, well, okay, we've deployed our light tanks, but hey guys, let's just not deploy this thing too, because we just don't want to. Like I know there's gameplay reason. The gameplay drives everything first as opposed to the lore, but it's just kind of weird that we have. I mean, yeah, we have the tech system at all, but rather, things are chosen. Like, why can't the respective armies just do what they want to do, what they think is best, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I might be derailing your argument, so my fault, Disk.
I just think that sometimes, like, there's always going to be some vehicles that are not going to be unlocked, and I think that's not going to change unless at least some element of like, forcing something to be unlocked is enabled, because people just never want to use this specific thing.
I would argue don't lock things at all and just have maybe less popular things, but at least people can choose to do them, and maybe people can discover the powers of those unpopular items, and they can develop their strats and then actually come up with something on their own. Kind of like going back to the very top of the question, very top of the show, where I was asking, maybe a little more agency in that, but I don't know. Be frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely this thing that the ultimate goal, it would be that there is player agency, but we're seeing unique outcomes every time. So the question becomes, how do you have a system where you have unique outcomes, but players also have, like, they could do whatever they want? Because what we found is that when you let players do anything they want, like arguably full player agency, 99% of the time it will eventually arrive at just one outcome, and then you have to ask yourself a question: are we going in a circle? Because if every time everyone's just choosing the optimal thing, then is that really choice, right? Or is it just sort of, it's kind of like, you're doing it wrong if you're not making the best thing, and in that case, is there really player agency at all, right? So I think this is why it's a challenging design issue, because we've definitely seen this huge bias toward. I mean, it just makes sense, right? Like, players want to win ultimately in the war. So if you gave everyone
they want to win, certainly, but I actually think. Oh, I mean, I'm weird in that I don't care who wins when I'm playing under a pseudonym. But I think people are more just moment to moment. They just want to do what they want to do. They want to chase the high of just attacking something with what they want, or pushing forward in the way that they want to. Certainly, again, people do want to win. That's why you have cheaters, right? But I think on the whole, people just want to use the thing that they want to be using, and
that's the thing, though. I think that the problem is that usually what people want to use are the people who actually do the scrapping and do the teching. People what they want to use are usually like what clan men want to use. None of that, like, I'm not saying that only they do it, but usually people who work in big group efforts. So it's why I think, let's say that this war again, the ballista was teched instead of the light tank, because people who work in groups know how to use a ballista. Like an individual player would, you can't use a ballista individually. You need to some support.
And that's kind of a flaw inherent to the system, because I mean, yeah, sure, organized groups that are larger should be able to. They kind of do have an outsized influence on things, because, well, they put in the effort to organize. So yeah, they kind of do. But then, yeah, like you were saying, things are kind of narrowed down and predetermined in a way. So I don't know. So maybe you're proposing maybe more RNG. I'm proposing, a lot of people are proposing in chat, that maybe just don't have things lock in such a stringent way. Maybe open things up a bit more. I don't know.
I like the idea of it. I like the idea of a random, it makes things feel a little bit fresh, at least everywhere. It's a tiny bit different.
I like my RNG in certain places. I don't know if maybe it should be in the tech tree, but hey, you put up a good argument for it, because things are getting predictable. We're a few wars in, so who knows? We've gone on a bit here, but that was a really good question, really good topic, Disc. As always, I think I'm seeing a pattern here, and I like it. So, Disc, thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, coming up.
Do we leave? I'm gonna leave.
Oh yeah, you're good. I'm getting reports that there may have been rocket launch. No, there wasn't. Not according to Foxhole Stats, there wasn't. This stream brought to you by FoxholeStats.com. FoxholeStats.com. Some smart guy put numbers together, and now we have an instantaneous view of the war on your web browser. So it's fantastic. In the press corps, we lean on that so hard. So appreciate you, Hayden, for that. All right, coming up next. We have so many callers. This is is the spots here? Did I miss him? All right. Well, if he ain't here, he ain't here. Coming up next, oh my gosh, Hero Luca. Hero Luca. I don't know if he can hear me. I did drag him in. He might have stepped away. That's okay. He is currently muted and deafened. I go back to someone else here in a bit. That's okay. That's okay. For the record, I do grab people from the lounge mid-conversation, because obviously I can't hear what they're saying, and they're probably behind on the stream. So, Hero, that's okay. If you come back to this, it's all good. Let's see if we can find Foxy, who's not in the chat. So we will now go on to Nocturne. Let's get someone going here. Hey, Nocturne, welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps. How are you? Hello.
It's always a pleasure to be on.
Pardon me?
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely. It's always good to have the Swords of Morrow represented in the call queue. What'd you have for us here?
A little bit of an idea and a little bit of an insight into some backroom colonial dealings on tech decisions and war status as a whole.
Okay.
I'm going to start with my idea because it's kind of a small one and I'm still working on it. But since Mark is here, I figured I might as well share it. So, the relic idea, when first implemented, was a bit iffy-esque. Everyone remembers the Day 1 Storm Tank spam, and how fun that was for everyone involved. But I figure that now that there's the system with Arm Race, and how it seems to be more of a, I guess you would say, playing field leveler with the relic tanks. So, for example, these would only be like a limited spawn. They don't spawn unlimitedly, but there is a set amount that are placed in the world randomly. These set amounts are at a fixed number for each certain type. When they lose it and it's gone forever. There's no respawn. So that way, when you get later in the war, they're just not sitting around, but they have purpose. Early war.
So, sorry, is it like you're proposing that as a possibility for the future? Is that?
Yeah, like it's more of like a test for them again to see if with now the changes that have been implemented, these can be brought back in some sort of way.
Okay,
to be like a stepping stone onto an actual platform of how to bring it back.
With arms race, it's more feasible to bring it back in that first version, right?
Yeah, because with the first version, it was like you can use them pretty much any time, no matter what. But with arms race, now
I guess my question is, what have you guys liked about the relic system so far, and the various like iterations of it, and what would you want to see more of besides just bringing it back in that first iteration? Well, like, what was it about the first iteration that you liked? Maybe we'll start there.
Well, with the first iteration, what I personally liked was the fact that there was this heavy sense of firepower on the field, but at the same time, like with the first iteration and how it was just storm tanks immediately, have fun dealing with them, that wasn't very fun. But with the next one, where it's like, as tech progresses, that would be a good kind of balance. But it was more having like these unique vehicles that was everyone kind of fawned over. Whenever someone found, it was always like a sort of joyful occasion, and it certainly helped to change the early war, because as you can even see with this war, early war kind of turns into a stalemate. But I think with these relics, they could kind of have a more dynamic push to it, but it wouldn't be a far dynamic push. Sort of, here's your gain. You're gonna have to hold it now with what you have until you actually get the proper vehicles that then come down later on the tech.
So you like the unpredictability of it?
Yeah, it's kind of
factor in the war. Yeah, I do think that I guess to comment on that, I do think that bringing them back now would be different than, because of the extra vehicles that are in the game and all the extra ways you can deal with things like tanks, and on that note, I really do I do feel like we would bring them back at some point. I think relics have been this nice part of the game that we get to see a couple times a year. I think this year we had one relic war, and I think that we'll probably see another one before the end of the year, because it's just a cool part of the lore. It's a cool part of the game, and we love working on relic vehicles. It's a chance to like sort of I know Julian really enjoys, like, every day he posts a couple of like images on like old stupid looking tanks as like a proposal on what like new relic vehicles might look like in the future. But anyways, that's all a sidebar. I do think that I don't know if we bring them back in terms of like spawning them randomly in the world, but I think bringing them back at earlier stages of the war is definitely interesting.
Yeah, I can agree with that too. There's also, everyone's talking about possible like frontline vehicle repair base, but that's certainly an idea to mull over as an entire team on how to actually get that up and running. But my only kind of input on that is, if you still have the old fort model, just kind of cut it in half, add a garage door to it, and there you go. That's kind of like the placeholder.
Wait, like you mean the old forts?
Yeah.
The ones
that look like a castle, yeah.
Right.
Secondly, kind of with the tech talk, I think that this war was a good sort of testing in terms of this kind of new system of a more democratic vote, I guess, within the Colonial faction, for those who actually are even in the correct channels for that. But it's an interesting kind of scene, being able to see kind of like how everyone adapts to this. And I think the biggest was with the siege tank, because everyone had the bad first experience with siege tank, and when everyone was seeing it was being teched again, it was like, no, why aren't you just getting the regular LT? And the reason was, well, the Kreneska right below it is better in every way, and we can use these siege tanks to actually get through bunker systems and defenses and such, which even in these last waning days of the war have been a great boon in terms of things. Like just personal recollection, I do remember, I believe it was Raid, who decided to go into the Linn of Mercy with a couple of siege tanks and hit a bunker complex that was apparently getting close to a storm cannon, and one tapped it with the siege tanks, which if we didn't have them, that would have been a lot harder to do, or possibly almost impossible, and then they would have had a long-range storm cannon just right there, able to hit within our own borders.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that to the point of the problem pointed out earlier of not being able to try vehicles out as easily, which I think the prototype system was supposed to fulfill that role, like allow you to build a version of the vehicle that isn't the mass-produced version, but maybe you get to build it and try it out. Definitely players were shying away from using the Ballista until this war, and I think finally players have, well, they've tried it out. I was personally making a mission to try to get as much observation on it being used in the field as much as possible, and we did get some of that over the last week. But I'm really curious to hear more about it now that players have used it, and it did receive a bit of a buff in this upcoming update. With the inventory, it can hold twice as many shells as before, but I'm still interested. Like, do you feel like it's? You mentioned that it has been useful at least some degree. Do you feel like it is still, I guess, lackluster compared to where you think it should be? Do you feel like it's at a good place? Do you feel like it's too powerful? What's your kind of thought on it?
My sort of input with it is, I think certainly could have like a little bit of a range buff, which is as controversial. Just looking at the channel above, I can certainly see that's a very controversial opinion to ask or to state. But the reason for this is as follows: in Deadlands, when we were trying to get across the bridge at Liberation Point, there was one dude in the rifle garrison with an anti-tank gun, and that was always able to constantly readily pin and hit the siege tank even at its max range that can lob its shell. So it was kind of hard to use properly. So I think kind of a tiny, like maybe 5-meter increase would be good, just to have that little extra wiggle room. Because it also, from a weapon standpoint, makes sense that a rocket could probably hit that further. And the alternative would be buffing the armor, which I don't think many people would take too kindly as compared to just increasing the range a bit.
Gotcha.
I'll be honest. I kind of was tuned out for that. Did we reach consensus?
I think so. I like to think so.
So there's a lot. So for those who don't know, there's a lot of chat and a lot of DMs and a lot of stuff that goes on in the Discord while all this is happening on the front end. So every now and then I kind of get turned around, and if I look like I'm completely lost, sometimes I am. So Nocturne, my apologies.
It's all right, no worries.
Yeah, hey,
I space out a lot too.
Are you good? Did I cut you off?
Yeah.
Are you good?
No, we're all good.
All right, hey Nocturne, thank you so much for stopping by. Good luck to the swords tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good one.
And have a good night, everyone.
All right, let's get to some of the people that I skipped, because that's not good. That's never good. I don't like doing that. Spots, welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps.
Oh, hey.
Hi, what'd you have
I'm
for
here.
us?
Oh, I was actually thinking about this. I realized this. Scrimmage was actually a good tutorial for the game. The old scrimmage mode back in the day.
I'm sorry, so you're saying there should be a tutorial, which I agree, but
Yeah.
make it skirmish?
No, I was saying that scrimmage was like a good hands-on tutorial for new players.
Ah, I see. Well, yeah, it can be. It certainly can be. I mean,
it's a good way to introduce players, like newer players, to like the basics of the game, like Armor Combat 101, vehicle, like basically the basics of the game.
sure. I think there.
It's like
it's kind of like a how does the person actually receive it? It's a difference between skirmish mode where there's like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just skirmish mode, but at the same time that's kind of not cool, right? You kind of want to be involved in something, so maybe that's why I think the coolest time for people to learn and hands off is during a war, in the middle of a war. Just throw them in the middle of it, where you can see tanks going down the street and like, what the hell is going on? I still need to learn how to load a rifle, but this is so cool. So I don't know.
Right, it depends on what type of player you are. One thing I noticed is that sometimes players just get so confused about this game. They're like, "What's going on? What I'm doing?" and then leave because they're just too confused.
Let's punt it to Mark. Mark, obviously, yes, the standard answer of no tutorial until you reach 1.0, because obviously things are still in development. But what are your thoughts on how you think you can improve the new player system beyond the tutorial? But this is not just the opening hours, but the opening week of play, the opening 10 hours of play, 20 hours. What do you think about the new player experience there?
Yeah, I think that there is room to improve. I really feel that the game has changed so much, and that's an area that we have not taken a look at in a while. So I'd almost want to get more like data on that somehow, collect more information, because in order to improve it, we really need to know what the major problem areas are, right? So just hearing things like this is really helpful. I think it is a goal to get players certain information, but I don't necessarily think it's a goal to remove all the friction, because it's something that everyone has like a different opinion on.
Yeah.
I think some people have like a philosophy of like, oh, the game should teach you everything, right? And then other people like us, we have a slightly different philosophy that a part of the wonder is like learning how everything works, right? So we want to like what I kind of, especially me personally, like what I despise are games that just give you tons of like dialogues that just don't let you play the game. This is not even like this is not like a company thing. This is like me, like my
Right.
my personal peeve is I hate it when I start a game and it's just pelting me with like, this is how you do this, you move your mouse here, you click this button, like, I don't like that. I like games that teach you how to play by playing, right? Just let me start, I want to get going. And I think that if there's a way to improve new player experience, I think that's how I would want to do it. I would want to Yep.
I was actually thinking this about myself, how to implement like a scrimmage 2.0 in modern day Foxhole, because scrimmage was really like an old concept back in the day. It's kind of like how you adapt it to this like completely different era of Foxhole. And I was thinking, okay, so port bases are gone, so maybe have 3 victory points, 1 midpoint, and 2 industrial towns that are victory points, and then have like the different victory conditions, like from the old scrimmage system where it was like total victory, partial defeat, total defeat. As well as I was thinking about, okay, if we do that, then probably limit the tech tree a bit to limit it to a certain tier, like maybe around early half tracks, like the normal half track for both factions, and maybe the anti-tank and heavy armor car.
This is a really unpopular opinion, but I think skirmish mode should be a bygone era. No more skirmish. Everything is just constant cycles of war, and obviously that needs to be reworked. We need an actual resistance mode that is actually a finished thing, as opposed to the nothingness that it is now. Not a big fan of practice mode. Not a big fan of skirmish. I just think it's arbitrary and dumb and really isolated, and yeah, it takes away from the wonderment of the thing about skirmish mode is that it's hands off. Who cares? This is a nothing. None of this matters. That's not that. I don't think that's what Foxhole's about. I think every moment should matter to a degree, and yeah, you're gonna screw up a lot. That's fine. You'll be forgiven, but I don't know. I think there's different ways of approaching it. Someone in the chat mentioned, and I've long advocated for this myself. Maybe not enough, but a mentor system where you can mark yourself. Hey, I'm an actual. I know what I'm doing. Which to a degree that is kind of like unofficial, where it's like, okay, yeah, that's the rank system, right? So someone who is a colonel, that is in a way saying that they know what they're doing. Not necessarily mentored though, because maybe they don't want to teach people, or maybe they're not. Just because you're a high rank doesn't mean you're capable of teaching people or even leading people effectively. That just means you have a high rank. Say what?
You just remind me of something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a system in TF2 where you can.
Yes, yeah, I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
Where
it pairs you.
Where you can teach like new players for TF2. It's like you spectate them and point out like, go there. Like basically like basic markers and showing them what they can do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, shout out yes, thank you, chat. Shout out to Help in brackets. That's a group that is dedicated to being there for updates, being there for new players, being there at the islands, the lobby islands, the home islands, for when people are there and they teach people. I don't know how active it is these days, particularly between updates, but they always do good work. And as someone who back in I think 2018 who did a lot of that, it's not easy. I actually have a script, and to do all that with people, have the patience with people, it's harder than it looks. But anyway, Spots, thanks so much for stopping by. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. If he doesn't answer, I'm going to keep him here for a full minute, unless he just left the chat entirely. Hero Luca. I think I lost him. No, what? Goodness. Let me see. I'm going to ping him. I'm not skipping him again. Not skipping him again. In the lounge chat, they're watching the presidential debate. Don't tell me I'm going to skip him again. Oh, I hate this. Skipping people. Oh, he's in lounge? Does he have a different name? No. Okay, there we go. All right. Nope. Come on. Hero Luca, welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps. Welcome back. All right, go ahead. Sorry, I'm so sorry I skipped you. Please, what do you have for us here?
All right, thank you. So I was going to call in to ask about bunkers, because this is the first thing that I really see in Foxhole, aside from logistics, that's sort of come to its 1.0 state. And I wanted to know Clapfoot's opinion and stance on them in light of that. Specifically, in this most recent war, I saw a huge change in the way bunkers were used. They became the preferred method of fortifying something, which in the past would have been more or less a spam of foxholes or gunnests. Has Clapfoot seen this? Is this something you've observed?
Yeah, I would almost take it further and say we've seen an uptick in that for the last couple of wars. Yeah.
All right, and so building towards that, are you seeing this as a uniform sort of thing that people are? Earlier in the stream, you mentioned that there was this mentality you wanted people to avoid of, because it works, it's the only option that people start engaging in. Are you really seeing that happen with these structures? Because what I've noticed is that typically what it is just a series of rifle garrisons and perhaps a T garrison that's just placed pretty much the same way you'd see the Foxhole or AT gun spams.
Yeah, it's such a tough balance with in Foxhole. Things always are in a very precarious state of balance. If you at the beginning, we made bunkers a bit more rigid. You needed power to power them. Some of the placement requirements were a little bit more strict in some cases, and people didn't use them as much. And the more we remove these barriers, suddenly it just tipped in the other direction, and like you start seeing what it is right now. I think if we had to pick from one of the two, we definitely would pick now, because we do want the bunker system to be used more. Um, and we actually furthermore have more plans for expanding on that system in the future, or expanding on it with more content, more things you can build. But it is one of those things of like, okay, let's give players the full freedom to build these wherever they want, however they want, and you end up with this sort of optimal solution of spamming it in a certain way. But when we try to break that by saying, okay, well, there's a trade-off now with like power, or you can't build it beside, like, you need to separate them by X number of tiles, we're kind of forcing this onto players. But then now you end up sort of with this thing of like, okay, well, maybe it's not that useful anymore. So I think trying to find that balance has always just been this ongoing challenge. I guess my question to you is, it's sounding like you're seeing this in a negative way. Like, are you not liking the fact that it feels spammy everywhere? Like, is that sort of your concern?
Not exactly. I see it that way, but one of the things I'm also seeing is that there's no use for it beyond that. When trenches started, they were fortifications that people used. Then very quickly there became this mentality that, well, if you build a trench, the enemy's just going to take it, and use it against you. My opinion on that is that's exactly what it's for. It's supposed to be essentially a stretch of ground that neither side controls that they continually fight over, and it's just pledging resources towards a sort of continual battle that can only be ended by superior technology, which is sort of how I see the Foxhole mid-game playing out. I'm not sure if that's the vision for you guys, but that's sort of where I get the negative riff from it. I did not expect you to say that this was a feature that was still being fleshed out. I thought this was like ready to ship for 1.0, and that it would just be changes to, as you mentioned earlier, restrictions going into it. So that's actually news to me. But basically, another question I wanted to ask is, what is your vision for bunkers? Before they were added, I believe that we were discussing trenches, there was this conversation of, okay, what happens if the normal FOB becomes useless? And essentially, this is just something that's rarely ever built. The favor is you build a bunker base. That's what people want to do, because that gives you the fun tools like bunker garrisons. How do you see that playing out in 1.0, and where do you see the balance between those two structures being?
Yeah, I think that we want to lean more. So I guess to rewind time a bit, when we first came up with the bunker system, our plan originally. Oh, it looks like a.
Yep, I saw it too.
Confirmed reports. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just glanced at my screen and it turned red.
Yep, Jade Cove, we have confirmed of a rocket launch by the Wardens. The rocket leaving Endless Shore from the Endless Shore launch site, and arriving a successful detonation at Jade Cove. Very symbolic target. Probably more than anything, a symbolic target by the Wardens, considering it's already well behind the lines. But not much industry in Jade Cove. But it does seem my initial reaction is that considering that the Wardens have already struck deep behind the Colonial lines and they appear to have the momentum, provided the Colonials do not muster themselves a successful counter across a wide front, it seems that the Wardens are expending it on symbolic targets such as Jade Cove. So we will get to that in a bit. I'm actually going to ask members of the press corps now to investigate and see what they can gather on who launched the rocket, what assets may have been inside Jade Cove, the manner of which the task force, the Warden task force, managed to get a spotter behind there and how they arrived there. But until then, let's focus back on Hero's question because he's having all sorts of problems getting his message out. Mark,
yeah, sorry. Fine. I apologize for that.
Mark, do you remember what Hero asked?
Yes, I remember what I was about to say. At the beginning, when we were planning out the bunker system, we wanted it to be a full replacement for things like foxholes and all the other defenses. But we decided in the end to keep the other system around just to give players more flexibility. I think what our goal is moving forward is not so much like bunkers versus foxhole. What we want to do is move away from general purpose things that just kind of you can spam down and it covers all your bases. So sort of like a gun nest fell under that category. It's like there's really not a downside to turn something into a gun nest. Like you guys talking earlier about wanting to make things interesting in like a TF2 type of way where everything has a purpose as opposed to like everything is kind of the same. I think that sort of is a bit of that goal there is we want to move away from these general purpose does everything type of stuff and have more specific things with constraints. And I think just by virtue of being in a bunker already has more constraints. Like you have to have a trench attached to it that makes it all the way to your bunker base, so there's already a trade-off there. I think the gun nest and the foxhole, we would want to review those at some point, and maybe try to sort of the long-term goal is that every structure has a little bit more of a trade-off.
All right, well, that sort of covers everything I had to ask. I know there's a lot of other people who have questions, so I guess I'll leave it to them. Thank you, Mark. Sure. Thank you, Geoffrey. And
hey, Hero, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for stopping by.
It's no problem. I should have had my mic unmuted when that happened.
That's okay. I cut people off all the time in the middle of whatever's going on up there in lounge. It's always a mystery to me. All right, have a good one.
So.
All right. I don't know, Mark. How much do you have left? I know I started late, so.
No worries. I can do another 2.
Another 2? Okay, that's pretty good. And let's see if I can. So actually, let's count this as not one, but Foxy had a written question here. Question for Mark. Was it a conscious decision to not give the Colonials a 68mm vehicle, or was it just a consequence of the development of arms race? And is a Colonial 68mm vehicle planned in the near future?
For the first question, yes.
Conscious decision to not give the collies a 68mm vehicle.
No. To the question of was it just a consequence of development? Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff we want to give to both factions, and not having 68mm there from the start was definitely a result of development.
Is it? I'm going to speculate here, and you can confirm or deny. But did you guys look at your list of vehicles and be like, this is so much. This is going to be so much for them to handle. This is going to be just a flood of vehicles. And now, like 5 wars in, everyone's already like, not enough. This is boring.
Yeah, I guess that's. Well, I can't say we didn't expect it, but I'd like it because I feel like you're right. You're right that's how a lot of players feel, but I would argue that it's still more exciting than it used to be, where it would be a whole like half year before you even saw a single new vehicle, right?
Fair enough.
So I do think it is. I do think it is better. But to get back to Foxy's question, that second question is yes.
Colonials receiving a 68 millimeter vehicle, maybe a little earlier in the timeline, sometime in the near future, or at least sometime along. So just kind of getting back to how you were saying that there needs to be more.
Yeah, it's like right now, it's the part that I think the parts that are lacking in the tech tree is getting back to that. We're honing in on like the obvious choices again, right? So like how do we fight that? And it's also those flaws that have been pointed out that were discussed earlier about one faction's tree being lopsided in one way and the other faction's trees being lopsided in like another way. But you know what? Like these are problems, but in some ways there are like, this is gonna sound really cheesy, but it's like it's like an opportunity too, and it's if there's a positive side, right? Let me put it this way: if there's a positive side, it's that these are issues that we can address. Like there's a path to addressing these, right? Or at least to continue the ball rolling constantly in addressing them, as opposed to other much like why I sound kind of more confident on this one than necessarily other aspects of the game is that we've dealt with like much more complex, like existential design problems, right? Whereas this one, it's like, well, yeah, we have to give the Colonials a 68 millimeter tank,
or the silver hand, or the distance of the Colonial mortar vehicle.
Yeah, and we can solve it by adding new content. We can solve it by rotating the tech tree around, which we do in every war.
But you have the baseline.
Yeah, so it's almost like, in a weird way, it's like the fun part for us. We get to add in more cool stuff to try to address these problems. But I certainly understand that's more of like a developer centric view. So kind of like before, everyone is like, well, this is not fun, this is not great. Yeah. It's a developer-centric view. So.
As someone who has to fill up 24 hours of content on the radio because I'm stupid like that, and I set that bar for myself, I look at myself, oh, this is so much music. This is going to be so much variety. No, it's not. No. Dear God, no.
But to be fair, though, making like a game like Destiny, which I think you referenced earlier, is much more hell in terms of making content. Like people burn through that in like 3 days after a big release, and then as opposed to us, it takes a couple of wars. But just imagine your Destiny. You spent months making this new expansion pack, like half a year. You release it out there, and literally on the second day, everyone goes to the subreddit and tells you that there's not enough content.
Yeah, they're done. They're finished.
Yeah.
Or like we're okay. We're gonna get to the next caller in the next 30 seconds.
Sure,
but
sure.
I love the IGN series where they show dev speed runs, and my favorite is the Tony Hawk speed runs where they finish the hangar level in like I think a minute and 20 seconds, and the developer just said that was 9 months of my life right there in those 90 seconds.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly. That's exactly.
All right. Actual caller. We have Zackreaver. We'll do Zach, and then I think I guess we're gonna close with the Warden Navy, it seems. But Zach, thank you so much for joining Zero Dark PressCorps. Have you been on the show before?
No, this is actually my first time. But I wanted to have a question for Mark. Actually, a couple things, and seeing as how I'm probably going to be the last person up here, I decided to tag on a couple small ones that some people were saying in chat. But I mostly wanted to bring up the couple questions that I have for Mark.
Yeah, go for it.
Specifically, it has to do with the tech tree. My biggest problem with the tech tree has always been, since its first implementation, the way that tech gets locked out. It feels like our choices are being limited. Every time the tech tree gets around to a choice, we have to decide between one or another,
even if one choice might be useful, we always have to go for what the best choice is. I've wanted to use an APC on Wardens this war, but I didn't want to create tech split, and I didn't want to use a prototype because prototypes can't be repaired, and a prototype APC just doesn't seem that useful.
Gotcha. So, yeah, this is, I guess, similar to one of the previous things that were brought up. So, your main complaint is that you want to use vehicles that are locked.
Yeah, well, not just that. It's hard to tell if a lot of the new stuff is good or not because oftentimes we don't get a chance to try them, and because we have to wait till a tech tree completely loops around Battle Tank. By that point, we're getting into the culture where people are going to town halls, resetting them with satchels, battle tanks are rolling out all over the place, and most players on both sides aren't even playing anymore because they're just kind of exhausted. Which just kind of goes with how it works. It just feels like the gameplay loop of the game. I have no idea whether or not a vetted or double vetted armored car or whatever might be good or not because I've never gotten a chance to see them.
I guess what would be the optimal system for you that would solve that problem?
I just feel like the idea of locking the tech out doesn't feel like it works for the game because even with the previous tech system, even if tech didn't unlock immediately, we would eventually have something. There was always the unpopular choices. Some people didn't want to use sniper rifles. Some people felt like the radio backpack should always be skipped, and there was always something that people wanted to get first. But eventually you would get something, and you could use it. And there was always that issue where the armored car would eventually become obsolete when half-tracks or tanks come around. But if you wanted to roll around an armored car, you still could. You weren't locked out. You just people would think your choice was skeptical, but if you made it work, it was one of the most enjoyable experiences. And there's nothing more fun with going behind an enemy battle tank and scaring them with an armored car. I more feel like the current system, it feels like the wars are kind of the same. We're always going to pick what we know is good as opposed to what we think might be good. And everyone's just kind of funneled into the same path.
So, I guess so it sounds like your optimal system just because I'm trying to imagine what the optimal system would be in your mind that would correct this issue. It sounds like you would want some system like the old tech tree, or rather would it be more like the new tech tree, but somehow there are more ways to get at these vehicles? Or would you just want a flat kind of like everything is like buildable at all times? Like what
just
sort of which one
with
of those
what you have right now? Your tech tree is pretty interesting. I like how some things are kind of moved into certain areas. I would like if just all three of those options just get unlocked after something happens. But in terms of like the iron and aluminum collection, primarily on the iron part, it feels kind of like a chore to collect things because, for one, prototypes don't feel as useful, or at least most of them, like the APC argument. We can still kind of make prototype field artillery and tanks useful because they're durable enough to survive not being repairable. But with a prototype armored car or an APC, it's very hard. I feel like those should be repairable. But even still, the fact that unlocking tech being tied to collecting iron makes it feel like it's a chore. I was excited that I could work the salvage fields and collect iron to be the first person out there with a tank. But because my iron is also required to unlock tech, I'm immediately forced to just go with the tech progression because I want to keep things sped up and move the war along.
Right. So I guess I'm hearing a secondary issue you have, which is the grind for secondary resources. Like that's an element that you would just kind of not want in the game.
Well, primarily, it's just the old with the old tech system. I liked how it was automated. With the new system, I like how things kind of change up how it is. The only thing I really don't like about the new tech system is how choices get locked out. Like, I'm fine with, say, one war the Silverhand might not show up, or one war we don't get a variant battle tank. But if I have a choice between an APC or a field anti-tank gun, I see uses for both, but knowing that if I pick one, I won't see the other until after battle tanks get unlocked, makes it feel like I'm effectively not going to have the choice to be experimental with the other thing in that war. What I would just like is more ways to access technology that not everybody necessarily wants, or just for the tech locking to be reconsidered.
Yeah, I guess I guess I'm kind of looking for things to add to this one. One thing that was considered previously was just completely not, like, instead of a system where players have to vote, where we would just kind of say, here's the tech tree for this wars, here's the vehicles, but you aren't sort of like picking between, but there was pushback on that design choice. We wanted to give players the ability to actually, like, sort of like, rather than us saying in this war, this is the set of stuff that you're going to get to make the war feel special, because this is, because that was one of our goals, right? We wanted every war,
like more player choice in the matter.
Well, I guess the way it started was we first of all wanted every war to feel slightly different, and the heavy-handed approach there would be to say, we literally, us, the devs say, okay, in this war, Wardens get Silverhands, and this and this and this, Colonials get this and this. And then in the next war, we hard change that and say, okay, it's now you get this, this, and this, and then the Colonials get this, this, and this. But you do get everything, right? So it's kind of like, kind of imagine something like the old tech tree system. But
yeah, that kind of does happen though.
So what we opted for was instead, okay, well, let players make that choice of set that is introduced. But what now? That's not now what we're seeing after a couple of wars. That fights against that new way of doing things. Is that players are starting to find this is the best thing, and then that's a flaw. I think that's a flaw that we have to work at, right? Because I think what you're getting at right now is you're saying that it is kind of getting back to being the same, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, but what I think that might actually help it a bit, and this was an idea I actually posted on Reddit, but I wanted to get a more direct response. I really like the concept of using iron to get prototypes, but I would prefer if that wasn't used for unlocking the vehicles, but rather for upgrading them with the veterancy system you have. Because I like the idea of making older vehicles better, because, like I said before, I love just surprising a battle tank with an armored car. I was excited about having an armored car with better stats in the late game to actually use when people are rolling around with battle tanks and such. But what ends up happening is, if the armored car gets teched really early, that's it. That's its stats. It's going to be that weak forever. And some vehicles that get teched later, like a double-vetted light utility vehicle, I mean, I don't know how good it is, because I've never seen a double-vetted vehicle, but it's just the fact that the up-vetted vehicles only happen when the tech tree flips around from skipping that vehicle, which feels weird. I feel it would be better if we could essentially research an upgraded version of something that we already have, so people that like something or want to make something better will work for it by collecting the iron. It also goes like, I would like if the tech was automated, but we used iron to improve things. That way, we're all working towards one goal to make things better, but even just the base level stuff. Like, if nobody wants to upgrade the APC, it's still going to be an APC. I'll still use a baseline APC. but maybe people might see that the APC is good and they want to upgrade it. That way, people that collect iron don't get seen as hoarders that are slowing down the tech tree, and rather they can be seen as scientists that are trying to experiment with new ideas and be the guys that invent that new tank.
Every single war. Sorry, that was a joke on how... Never mind.
You know what would be awesome? If every single war just had all new content. That would be amazing.
I mean, I love the content that's already in the game. I just feel like I don't have the time to enjoy it because most of the time it's locked out or I'm not part of the bandwagon to play it.
Yeah. All right. Hey, I don't know if that. Sorry. Again, distractions. A rocket has just gone off, so flood of communications happening behind the scenes
problem.
here.
I think my topic on the tech was pretty well given. My other one is actually on the new provisional garrison system, but primarily on the reset meta, where you know how a lot of people are just kind of going around with CVs and satchels, blowing up a town hall that no one's defending, and then just undoing all the build-up for it?
Yeah, I think that is an issue. In our eyes, we sort of like the one-tap reset.
It's the gamiest thing.
Yeah, we don't like it, and we want to probably look to find alternatives.
I mean, I could tell from watching several of your dev streams that was definitely not something you wanted for the game, but with provisional garrison and AI turning off if it's a brand new base or recently captured base, that is a lot more frequent and a lot more popular because originally you could have some Foxholes, some AT guns, or something to just slow them down from doing it. But now, if you don't have at least the minimum number of people setting their spawn at that base, anybody with just a CV could roll up with ammo or explosives or whatever they want and undo all of your progress instantaneously. And even if you come back and respawn the moment they're there and kill them and then rebuild the structure, all of your progress is gone. Just completely gone. I've defended a town and it got sniped. We moved around in a group to go and kill the guy, and we were like, I want to estimate 5 minutes away from getting permanent AI, and we had to start all over. And it felt like we were there for 10 hours. All I would really want in that situation, I understand that provisional garrison is there as a means to prevent spam, but when we had upgrade parts before, we at least had some way to ensure that AI could be permanent. And currently we have nothing aside from getting at least the minimum number of people to show up and set their spawn there. And what it results in is people just end up AFKing. I would love if they just consumed a large amount of G supplies, but the AI stayed on. Because that would at least mean that if I'm trying to protect this base, I can run to the factories and just keep churning them out of the factories to keep that base running, or just something I could do. I understand that you don't want bases to just be everywhere and the game to just be a war of AI. That sounds miserable. But currently with the system, that's actually the best way to play the game, is to just spam bases everywhere, because if people don't come to kill them in time, their AI becomes permanent. And with how territory is friendly or enemy, it speeds up whether or not they develop. So base spam is even worse than when we had upgrade parts, because now if they get ignored, they can just be everywhere. Except it's miserable for the front line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are certainly trade-offs with the base upgrade system. I think that just so what we saw previously. So base upgrades was the successor to facility efficiency, which a lot of players had a bunch of other issues with, and before that, what in the game, if you destroy a town and there wasn't any effort required. I guess I'll even take a step back and look at it from more of like an abstract standpoint. In a real war, you wouldn't just be able to. You would have to. The places that would be well defended would be where you move your army to, and your army can't be like everywhere. You can't just be like, okay, we're gonna destroy a bunch of places and instantly have instant growth, kind of like all over the place, right? And we used to see that happen in the game in the form of like these like night swings. The optimal way to win is at nighttime you sneak around, and it was actually even worse than just resetting. It would actually be, well, the optimal way is just go around, slap down a town hall, slap down some foxholes, and you were able to take out like 3 regions in the middle of the night when population was at its lowest, right? And these sort of wild night swings would happen. But what some of these systems are put in there now is to mitigate some of that. It's not a complete solution, and it probably will never be. But it's to say, okay, well, if you take over a location, you should have to supply it. You should have some level of like manpower there, which is why the way the system works, it doesn't just rely on player spawn points. That's just one of the things that drives it. You also can get a base to upgrade. You can progress your base upgrades by supplying it. You can progress your base upgrade by having structures built, right? So it's a measurement of like, is your like army there? Is there players? Is your faction doing things around there, right? But if you tap a town hall and then I think we can all agree that it's not realistic or necessarily good for the game if you can just tap a town hall.
Yeah, I definitely see where you were going with the new system.
Right, yeah.
It's definitely an improvement on the upgrade part system, because the reason you explained it definitely feels more fluid and less, oh, well, we just immediately capture this town, it's maxed out, capture this town, it's maxed out, capture this town, it's maxed out. I like the new system because it kind of slows things down, and I like the wars to be a little bit more dragged out. I don't like them to be fast swings. I do actually want to see the tech tree loop around enough, even though it's incredibly unrealistic. But with the current system, being able to reset a town like that is a huge problem, and I think that there's just a couple things that could be done to fix it. For one thing, we need to have some way to keep the lights on when people just move on or log off, so that night capper doesn't just immediately break things. Also, you mentioned supplying and building around it increases the growth rate. It's really hard for players to tell that, though, because all we see is a bar, and we kind of have to measure the pixel. We have no numbers to work with. We have no gauge telling us how much we've done. I understand you don't want to give us concrete numbers, but even just interacting with it and seeing something that says, "Hey, you're doing this is really helping," or because it ends up being, to actually hold a town, I either have to wall the town off 1,000,000 times or be super diplomatic in chat and convince everyone to move regions over here, which doesn't always work at all hours because the game doesn't have that many people playing at all times for how big the map is.
Yeah, so I think going to to hone in on something that is more easily actionable. I think all those things that were brought up can be looked at. I think the most concrete thing that can be actioned easiest is the one tap problem, right? I think that's the being able to tap.
What I think would be good, a good fix for that, but I don't know how easy it would be for you guys. Rather than resetting instantly undoing all the progress, how about if when they actually take it, it starts off fresh for them, but for the enemy side, it's kind of like slowly decaying in reverse. Much like how if we lose a town, one person taps it and we get it back, we don't have any progress lost. But if we lose it, the enemy takes it for like a couple hours and we get it back, some of the progress may have decayed or kind of dropped down. So if one person just snuck in and knocked out the town hall, we don't immediately lose a tier 3 town hall and permanent AI. I don't know how easy that would be, but that would at least make the idea of going into back lines and just blowing up and resetting a town hall less meaningful, because the moment a major logic hub or something gets its town hall reset, it just feels like, oh great, now one person could come back with a submachine gun and do this again every hour if they felt like it, and it feels lame and gamey, and doesn't feel like something, because, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't watching the map 24/7.
Yeah, no, I think the ideas you brought up are definitely in the right direction, at least in terms of the goals.
If anything, start with the G supply keeping the AI on, because G supplies are a good resource that we have to maintain, but oftentimes I log onto the factories being idle. Spam is already being kept in check by G supplies, but if our cost was provisional AI cost like 6 times the G supply cost, or like some ridiculous amount that keeps the AI on, okay, I'll pay that cost. At least I know the town's not going to be reset by one guy walking up.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense.
Well, good feedback on just how to make things less gamey and more natural. Capture the feeling of war. Hey, Zach, thank you so much for stopping by. Some really good feedback here.
The two quick things I wanted to throw in. Somebody wanted to mention, so you know how there's blueprints when you make a structure?
Mm-hmm.
Make those Warden exclusive and give Colonials green blueprints. You have any idea how many times I've been shot trying to build a Foxhole by my own team because I thought it was an enemy making it? Give green blueprints for Colonials. There you go, boss Big Teeth. I did it for you. And the last thing, and this is the critical thing, why didn't you give the Wardens the storm cycle? You thought it was a joke. We actually wanted that.
Oh, it's never too late, right?
Okay, I will take that as even if I have to find a vault or make it, or search some part of the map to find it, I want my unicycle. Alright, it was great being here.
Thanks, man.
Alright, thanks for stopping by, Zach. Alright, Mark, how you feeling?
Good. I could do the one more, but it probably has to be not too long.
Okay, well, let's bring in the entirety of the Warden Navy into the studio.
Hello.
Is that everyone? I know not all of you put Warden Navy sometimes.
It's Maul. Maul as well.
Oh, Maul? Okay.
What about Root? Don't forget Root. He's called Hex. Elijah as well. Ex-Elijah.
All right. Hey, so I'm assuming you're here to talk about the successful rocket launch by the 82DK.
No, I wasn't.
No,
not really. Actually, unfortunately, not.
No? Okay.
No, I'm here to talk about how great of a vehicle the Ballista is. Yes.
Okay.
Like, this war was the first war where we were really able to like see the full extent of its might, its PvE might, that is, and it's a really great vehicle, fun to use.
Yeah, we were using it, and we were fighting in what map was it? Umbral. We were doing some like concrete busting with it. It's a very great vehicle. In fact, hitting G houses with it is lovely, and just when you have armor escorts and infantry with you, it's a really, really well made vehicle. It's great at its role. Its range is great. The 25 meters is perfect. Just gotta say that. The 20 meters would definitely have been too short. And with this new update, with the new, increased inventory with like 10 slots but only ballista shells, it's really gonna make it very good.
Yeah, something I do want to add, and there's a common misconception made by most. Yes, you can shoot at an AT turret and kill it without the AT turret being able to shoot back in daylight. AT turret range is 20 meters. You can kill it.
But yeah, anyone got questions?
I do actually have a question. So, Glorious Overlord, Markfoot, right? So there's been a lot of complaints about how the asymmetrical warfare is bad. Personally, I'm in a camp where I like it, but at the same time, I think each faction kind of needs an equivalent vehicle. Do the devs kind of agree with that mindset, where each faction should have like a dedicated tank destroyer, a dedicated mobile mortar or artillery vehicle, something like that? Because I like the differences. I just wonder if where the devs' mindsets is with the asymmetry.
Yeah, I think that our goal isn't obviously to give the Colonials a silver hand and give a Ballista to the Wardens, but in terms of those base kind of like archetypes, I would almost call, or like we would want to. There is more of that to fill in for both sides. So there was a question earlier about like should the Colonials get a 68 millimeter type of like armored vehicle at some point, and I think yes, right? And it's like, would we want to give for example, the Warden's a 250 millimeter tech at some point? The answer is probably yes, right?
All right.
But our goal is like, it won't necessarily be exactly the same vehicle, right?
Oh yeah, of course. I was just wondering, like, because there's been ideas thrown around out there with a double-barreled like tank variant for the collies, a rocket artillery piece for the Wardens as the equivalent of a mortar half track. Which, mind you, I played around with mortar half track this war. That's a pretty strong beastie right there. Nothing like, shooting at stuff when they can't even see you while you got nice big fat tanks in front of you protecting you. That was pretty spicy.
Yeah, the AP rounds doing 12% damage, for every shot towards a battle tank. We found that to be extremely effective when using it. Both having infantry actually protecting it, and just using it, pushing with armor and killing defenses as well. It's a very good vehicle.
Can I just ask about, like, what's the reasoning behind that Wardens can't make the AP mortar shells? Because that's the only item in the game I think that only one faction can make.
Yes, that is the only item in one.
Like, are we gonna see more of these special ammos for both sides that only one side can make, or like, what's the reasoning behind it? Because I kind of feel like it doesn't fit in right now.
Yeah, actually, something we haven't talked about, but it is our mindset with that type of special ammo is we actually want to move away from it in the future, and I think that a part of putting that in was to make up for holes in tech. But things like the mortar AP ammo, I think that we want to avoid adding more things like that, and in fact, I would almost say that we would want to we probably would want to remove that at some point and sort of have a more permanent solution for the Colonials.
Okay.
Currently, we got new ACs this war. Obviously, it was in the dev stream, and they were there at the field. The HAC is I know it's brand new, but it's almost useless even the moment it comes out because 3HEs kills it instantly, and the range on it's very bad. 30 meters of range is rough because this ATAC comes up and one mag can kill the HAC, and it has no counter to it with its 5-second reload. You have to use them in packs, but that takes more manpower. This entire game is about using your manpower efficiently. So when it takes 4 people just to counter a 2-person vehicle, it's really hard to do such a thing. Also with the cost, because it's a glass cannon, it's like a gunboat. It's like it costs a lot of armats, but it dies so easily, so quickly. Just 3 HEs and it's gone.
Yeah, one stick immediately disabled. If it has tank armor, I would not have even thought that it could. Doesn't really bounce anything. Extremely susceptible to sticky rushes, and if it's anywhere close to night, you need to pull back entirely, which that does go for most armor, but especially for this. And ATAC, I feel like it still can be used late war in a capacity, but HACs, they have no place mid war to onwards. Even if they're tier 2 or tier 3, they're pretty useless afterwards.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, so just to recap, the HAC you feel like is too underpowered because it gets destroyed too easily and the range is lacking.
It lacks in every aspect. It doesn't have range. In fact, people were using it in reverse. You had to turn the cannon around to get every meter possible of that cannon.
Yeah. And in tests using it, if you were using the gun facing forward, it actually had maybe a little bit less than 30 meters ish, like on flat terrain, like around 30, but it could be less even on flat terrain when using the gun facing how it's intended.
So what? Oh, my question would be what would you feel would be fair changes to it to make it more powerful without it being like unbalanced at that point in the war?
It needs just a slight health buff, and it needs about 5 more meters of range, so it has a chance. Just a slight health buff or an armor buff to make it bounce a little more. Because when it gets hit like 3 HEs, 2 guys can do that with ease. But because the HAC is obviously it's supposed to be heavy and slow, which I can understand. It's a 40 mil gun in early game. Obviously, it needs to have its its bad things that are bad about it. But the fact that you don't have enough time to go forward once you see that first HE, you're just done for. It needs just a slight bit more health or armor to where it can survive those encounters. Like the sticky encounters, if you get engaged with that, yeah, it's over. I can understand that. You should die from that. 2 stickies to an AC should kill it. But when it's HEs with longer ranges, and it does a certain amount of damage it does to those vehicles, yeah, it's kind of crazy because it just undermines the entire idea of the vehicle because it dies just too quickly.
And the other thing that was mentioned about the ATAC, you guys were saying that it just as soon as it enters the war, it becomes useless too quickly. Was that sort of the observation there, or?
Yes,
that came a bit late. Yes.
Yeah, for the ATAC, I feel like that, it has a very good fire rate, but the problem is that with the tier that it's at, I mean, it's meant to take down things like APCs, armored cars, and so on, maybe LUVs for QRF purposes. But I mean, other than that, you're not gonna do a whole lot with it. It's kind of like the RPG Jeep in a way, to where it's good, but you can do a little bit with it late war, but not really a whole lot, and you're better off just making a different vehicle and saving up.
I guess what I really want to see is a Warden vehicle that scales really well into endgame, like the Mortar half track. Because I feel like a lot of Colonial things stay relevant throughout the war, and a lot of Warden things is just okay, this is your early game, and this is your late game tank or vehicle.
Yeah.
Like the Hex, there's no real reason to build it late game, but the ATAC, there's still kind of a reason because it's pretty good at flanking, and I would say in partisaning, it kills the tower in 1 mag.
It's also pretty good anti-infantry vehicle.
And obviously the Mortar half track is really good because endgame it even gets a new ammo to keep using it, and it's just great throughout the war. But the Heck is you have a window of 1 or 2 days to kill rifle garrisons with it because that's its main purpose. I feel like. So.
Also, on another question, as obviously the Navy, we love our boats. We love gunboats because it's the only gun, boat with a gun on the game. A boat with a gun, artillery piece. We had an issue this war where Colonials started using motorboats with revolvers to counter us, and we would die. We actually died because of it. People using revolvers to kill our gunboats. Our 165 Armat vehicle. I can't remember how many Armats. It's a lot. It's a lot of Armat.
Don't forget the shells.
And the shells also, it costs HE match for those shells, and it's very expensive to run. There's no small arm resistance on it. the fact that you can't counter this motorboat when you're in a gunboat by yourself just makes it like crazy, because all they do is they get behind you and the commander can't shoot his pistol 360, and if they get too close you can't shoot them with the pistol otherwise. So you just have these 3-man motorboats with revolvers just chasing your gunboat, a big gunboat, and it's just going to kill it because there's nothing you can do. It's the motorboat's too fast and the gunboat has no small arm resistance, unlike every other vehicle that has some kind of small arm resistance, but that has armor.
Yeah, let me make note of that one, because we need to review that one. I think besides that specific issue, in general, small arms dealing damage to armor vehicles and even more absurd like concrete structures and things of that sort is a bigger thing that we would want to take a look at in the future. And like provide other, because obviously you need some way in the earlier game to take out some of these structures, but to provide some sort of alternative to that, just even for the sake of it's pretty like immersion breaking that you can like shoot down concrete or like armored things, but that's just kind of a sidebar there.
Yeah.
Give us flamethrowers.
By the way, one of the top suggestions that I've had for quite a long time. So there's this movie called My Way, and essentially, like it's a vest, and it has 2 HE grenades on it, and then you have a trigger.
No,
yes.
Grayley.
Yes.
We're not here to waste this time.
So there is actually another thing I want to bring up, because we were talking about stickies before. This war, I haven't had a single sticky actually deal damage, and it's so frustrating when you spend all of that time trying to get close to something, especially when, it's early war, and the only real thing you have to counter stuff are stickies and AT rifles. And to see your sticky bounce every single time you try to get something is the most frustrating thing. Is that ever going to get addressed where stickies maybe can bypass, the armor rating? Because if infantry, manages to get up to a battle tank and throw that sticky that's right up against the armor, realistically it should, deal damage.
You have to aim the stickies at the treads, right? The dev said it in the last stream, I think.
It's like, well, yeah, even when I hit the treads, it can bounce.
It still bounces, and it makes me so upset. All war, the motor half-track has denied my stickies. All war.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you were, I guess, is it an unfortunate circumstance of RNG, or is it because you guys were also mentioning earlier that the hack is really vulnerable to stickies.
The hack should be vulnerable to stickies.
It's vulnerable to HEs. It should be vulnerable to stickies, but not HEs.
Yeah.
HEs just 3 HEs will
really
kill it. You can throw it really far, and it's yeah.
We'll keep an eye on that. So the actual thing that was mentioned previously was that if a sticky bomb is attached to a track, and it gets through the armor, so there is like a difference there. If it gets through, then it's pretty much like it's a very, very high chance that it'll track the vehicle. But it's not that if you just get it on there, then it'll like always penetrate the armor. So I guess that's the subtle difference there. Yeah,
it's fair enough. Like, I definitely think my poor luck with it has just been that poor luck. I don't think it's anything wrong with the code, because there's been other stories where people got every single sticky to hit they've thrown all war. But I personally just think that sticky should have a higher chance of going for that armor rating. It's, after all, an infantry weapon designed specifically to go for armor. There's nothing like getting a sticky to it, thinking you got that tank, and finding out it bounced, because it's a suicide weapon essentially.
Right.
Yep. But regardless, thank you for the answer with that one.
All right, gentlemen. Hold on. Am I coming through? Yes. Gentlemen, I know you have a lot of questions. I know there's a lot of you, but I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. We have reached the top of the hour, and I got a long night ahead of me as we cover this thing. But hey, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here to talk with the developers and stopping by and giving us your time here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Have a good one.
Guys.
All right, Taylor, Geoffrey, also Markfoot. Glad to talk to you.
Thanks.
Take somebody to start. Have a good one.
All right. Hey, Markfoot, thank you so much for stopping by here and giving us an hour and a half of your 2.5 hours, I think. I forget. I've lost track of time. But it's been a lot of fun, and it's always fantastic to hear from the community. Really, thank you to the community for doing all that you do, playing this funny little thing we call Foxhole, and giving us the feedback we need. Because certainly I can't give it. I have my points, I have my rants, but the community it just always astounds me with the things that they bring to the table and the passion that they have for this project. So Markfoot, thanks for giving us your time off hours out of the office. Well, I guess you guys are permanently out of the office for a while, but yeah, thank you for stopping by.
For sure. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, always, anytime. Have a good one. All right, well, that is the end of our show. Apologies again to those who are in a different time zone, personal schedules, particularly mine, but including the devs. It's just very, very hard to schedule these things so that everyone can get a chance to ask the devs questions. Foxhole is a global game. It is made up from people all around the world, and we do not mean to neglect those on the other side of the globe, those on different time zones than here in North America, but it simply is what it is. Again, it always breaks my heart that I can't do more than I can, but just the reality of my situation. Someday. But that's been Zero Dark PressCorps. Stick around. We're actually going to go now to special coverage of the rocket attack at Jade Cove. But I do want to end the show by saying to thank you to all of our callers and to Markfoot as always. So that's our show for Zero Dark PressCorps. Good night and good fight.
The PressCorps is a non-profit creative collective of artists, reporters, and players from the MMO video game Foxhole by Clapfoot. Our mission is to engross our audience in and amplify the stories of this unique war ecosystem. The PressCorps was founded in early 2018 by former PlanetSide 2 Radio Free Araxis host, Captain-in-Arms. It is a separate community entity and is in no way representative of Clapfoot. For more info, visit the PressCorps Discord through the link below.